The movie begins in Hamburg, Germany, at the German National Opera, where an orchestra is preparing for rehearsals. Unbeknownst to them, some armed gangsters are approaching. As the musicians focus on their instruments, their conductor arrives, and they begin their rehearsal. Suddenly, the gangsters burst in and fire shots into the air, creating chaos. During this, a rescue team, led by an officer named John, arrives on the scene. John gives final instructions to his team, emphasizing the importance of waiting for his orders before engaging. Meanwhile, the gangsters go live on stream, announcing they have taken over the opera house and demand a ransom of $300 million. After some time, tensions escalate as the gangsters' leader pulls out a woman from the crowd and shoots her dead. This horrific act causes Matteo, a member of John's team, to defy orders and open fire on the gangsters. With no other choice, John informs the rest of the tactical unit to open fire and eliminate the gangsters. A fierce battle ensues, showcasing the expertise of John's team. They manage to take down most of the gangsters after a short but intense exchange of bullets. Once the dust settles, John confronts Matteo for defying his orders, but he realizes Matteo has been shot and is in bad shape. Suddenly, one of the gangsters, disguised as a hostage, stands up. Matteo quickly finishes him off, but in the chaos, John is shot and killed. 5 years later, in Romania, we see Matteo, who is a retired special forces operative working in a sawmill. His life is far from pleasant, haunted by the memories of what happened to John. One day, he receives a photo that triggers a flashback to the good times he had with John's family. On payday, Matteo announces his retirement from the sawmill, marking the end of his stressful and dangerous career. He books a ticket to Bucharest, eager for a fresh start, and gets into a van to leave. His colleagues wish him well, but a shadow of past regrets still lingers over him. Meanwhile, in Amsterdam, we see an Interpol team led by a woman named Agent Shira in the middle of a high-stakes operation. They have intercepted a significant drug shipment, and tensions are high as they engage with gangsters from various mafia groups. The operation is intense, and the team manages to capture one of the gangsters. Shira remains calm and focused, directing her team with precision. However, one of the gangsters escapes and reports to the mob boss, Sabin, informing him about the intercepted shipment. Sabin, a formidable figure in the criminal underworld, is furious and vows revenge. He demands that his men find out who is responsible and make them pay. It turns out that one of the captured gangsters is actually an undercover Interpol agent who played a crucial role in the interception. Shira meets with him in a secure location and explains that they need to press on. Their goal is not just to disrupt the shipment but to dismantle the entire operation and arrest the mob bosses behind it. The agent, though exhausted, agrees to continue his perilous mission. As these events unfold, Matteo arrives in Amsterdam. He is a man seeking peace and a new beginning. He checks into a modest hotel, hoping to leave his past behind and start fresh. However, the memories of his last mission, where he lost his friend John, still haunt him. In another part of the city, we meet a man named Paul, a suave businessman who deals in cryptocurrencies. Over the phone, he assures a nervous client that everything is going smoothly. Paul is confident and charismatic, making his clients feel at ease. However, he notices some discrepancies when he sits down at his computer to check on his cryptographs. His previously smooth operations now show signs of trouble. Paul's face grows tense as he realizes that something has gone wrong. Meanwhile, Matteo arrives at John's house, feeling a mix of anticipation and nervousness. He knocks on the door and is greeted by Angie, John's daughter. Recognizing him, she excitedly calls for her mother, Helen. When Helen sees Matteo, she is taken aback but invites him inside for coffee. As they sit in the cozy living room, Matteo notices the changes in Helen's life. She is now married to Paul, the cryptocurrency businessman. Helen's demeanor is initially cold as she confronts Matteo about not attending John's funeral. John was like a brother to him, and his absence hurt them deeply. Matteo apologizes, admitting it was his fault John died, but Helen, who has moved on, does not want to revisit that painful chapter. Feeling unwelcome, Matteo stands to leave, but Helen, softening a bit, asks him to stay for a while longer. Meanwhile, in another part of the city, Sabin is dealing with a dispute in his restaurant. His chef has prepared a dish that isn't attracting customers, adding to the mounting tensions in Sabin's operations. Back at Helen's house, she informs Matteo that he can use some of John's belongings if he needs to. She admits it's good to see him after all this time, even if it stirs up old memories. Matteo appreciates her gesture and feels a sense of bittersweet nostalgia as he looks around at John's mementos. During this, Paul comes home and he finds Matteo with Angie. When he asks about him, Helen explains that Matteo is a close friend of John's and will be staying with them for a while. After dinner, Matteo sits outside, reminiscing about his time with John in Afghanistan. He recalls a mission where they talked about their families, and John shared the news that Helen was pregnant. Before going to bed, Angie tells her mom that she likes Matteo. This warms Helen's heart, and as Paul steps outside to chat with Matteo, he finds himself curious about the newcomer. Matteo shares his belief that there is always something worth fighting for. Meanwhile, Helen reassures Paul that he has nothing to worry about as Matteo was a significant part of John's life, and they had gone through a lot together. Later, Matteo finds a note from Angie, asking him not to leave without saying goodbye. The next morning, he goes jogging and, on his way back, encounters Helen and Angie heading out for school. Helen asks Matteo to stay with her dog while she's at work, and he agrees. Meanwhile, Paul receives an unexpected visit from Sabin. Sabin demands an explanation for the missing 15 million euros from his account. Paul, trying to remain calm, explains that there are complications in the crypto market, but assures Sabin that the issue will be resolved soon. Paul feels the pressure mounting as Saban's patience wears thin. He knows he must fix the financial situation quickly to avoid further trouble. With Matteo now part of their lives again, the intersecting paths of these individuals are set to unravel more secrets and challenges. Paul requests one more day to sort out the missing money. Sabin, looking at a photo of his family, grants him the extra day but reminds him of the urgency. As Sabin steps outside, the undercover Interpol agent continues tracking them. However, it becomes evident that Saban's men are also tracking the agent. On the other hand, feeling restless with his life, Matteo decides to do some carpentry work to pass the time. Helen invites him to join her and Angie for an outing, and they all have a wonderful time together. Matteo particularly enjoys bonding with Angie. Meanwhile, a worried Paul returns home, looking distressed. When Helen asks him what's wrong, he only mentions having some account calculations to work on, avoiding the truth about Sabin. Matteo continues his exercises, finding solace in his routines. During a tourist adventure, a group is horrified to discover a dead body hanging from a bridge. It's revealed that the victim was the mole working with Interpol, killed by Saban's men. Shira and her partner arrive at the scene to investigate the murder. They realize it's their agent and get worried about their cover being blown. Back at home, Matteo remains absorbed in his carpentry work. Meanwhile, the news reports a significant decline in cryptocurrency values, adding to Paul's stress. During this, Paul receives a call from Sabin, who demands his money and reminds him of the deadline. Paul reassures Sabin that he will fix the issue within the given time, even though he is deeply worried about the looming consequences. However, Sabin sends his men to resolve the issue with Paul. Meanwhile, Shira and her partner realize that the gangsters are sending them a message with the murder of their mole. At home, Angie teases Matteo about his scars before hugging him tightly, which Helen notices. Paul calls Helen to inform her that he won't be able to come over as he has some business to handle. After this, they decide to go out to have dinner. While out for pizza, Angie presents a drawing to Matteo. Matteo decides to leave soon but Helen asks him to stay a little longer for Angie's sake. Suddenly, gangsters arrive and confront Matteo. Angie notices the trouble and runs back to help, but gets kidnapped in the process. During this, Matteo gets hit down but manages to get on a bicycle to chase the car. Helen gets really worried and informs Paul about the kidnapping. Paul realizes that it must be Saban's men trying to send him a message. He immediately calls Sabin to plead for Angie's release, but Sabin hangs up. Meanwhile, Matteo continues the chase and jumps on top of one of the cars, fighting the gangsters. The chase ends in a collision with another car, causing Matteo to fall and have flashbacks of his time with John, who emphasized their family bond. Matteo wakes up in a hospital, handcuffed. Shira introduces herself to Helen and Paul, but Matteo soon moves out and is released. Shira asks Matteo about his next move, and he informs her that he is going to rescue Angie. Shira provides information about Sabin and the other related gangs, indicating that Angie's kidnapping is personal. When Shira and her partner ask Helen and Paul if they know anything about the connection, Paul remains silent. After this, Shira gives Matteo her business card, and after the others leave, she and her partner try to figure out the connection between Sabin and the kidnapping. However, they do not realize that they are being watched. One of Saban's men notices all the commotion and informs Sabin that Matteo has left the hospital. Then, we see Angie, who is now held captive at Saban's club. Meanwhile, Matteo, holding the drawing Angie gave him, recalls when John asked him to be Angie's godfather. Determined to rescue her, he gathers some items and prepares to leave. As he is leaving, Paul arrives to warn him, but in his panic, he accidentally slips and reveals Saban's connection with him. Realizing Paul knows more than he let on, Matteo confronts him. Paul confesses that he owes Sabin 15 million euros. After hearing this, Matteo retrieves John's guns and orders Paul to call Sabin and convince him that he has the money. Paul makes the call, and they agree on a trade for Angie. Sabin instructs Paul to deliver the money to a construction site. Before leaving, Matteo promises Helen that he will bring Angie back safely. She looks at him with a mix of hope and fear, trusting him to save her daughter. Meanwhile, Interpol learns that Paul knows something significant, but before they can act, Matteo ambushes Shira's partner and takes his car. On the other hand, Helen invites the Interpol agent inside for coffee, where he calls Paul for a talk. Paul, recognizing the agent as being from Interpol, grows increasingly afraid. Then, we see Matteo, who arrives at the construction site for the exchange and meets with some gangsters. He demands to see Angie, but they shockingly inform him that they don't have her. Then, they tell him that the deal was only to bring the money to spare her life. They take his bag forcefully, but when the team leader checks it, it turns out to be a bomb. The explosion hits several gangsters, and Matteo takes down the rest. He drags the surviving leader away for interrogation. Back at home, Helen is captured by one of Saban's men. An Interpol agent gets into a fight with the gangster, but after a short scuffle, the gangster cuts the agent multiple times with a blade. Helen, in a desperate move, shoots her gun to scare the gangster away, saving the agent's life. Meanwhile, Paul frantically packs to leave as Matteo tortures the captured gangster for Angie's whereabouts. The gangster initially resists but eventually breaks down and reveals the location. Helen attends to the wounded Interpol agent, but when he asks Paul for assistance, Paul reluctantly ignores him and heads to his car. However, one of Saban's men has been waiting and finishes Paul off. After this, Shira arrives as the gangster leaves. Inside, she comforts her partner, assuring him that he will receive a medallion for his heroism. Meanwhile, Matteo informs Shira to bring backup as he heads out for the rescue. At Saban's club, we see him worried about not hearing from his men. He sits down with Angie and asks if Matteo will come for her. She confidently replies that he will. During this, Matteo arrives at the club, and when the bodyguards try to stop him, he engages them in a fight. On the other hand, Shira arrives with her team as well, and they start shooting out some gangsters. The fight intensifies inside as Shira and Matteo team up to clear the place. Realizing the situation is dire, Sabin decides to run, taking Angie with him. He tells his men to stay behind and delay their pursuers. Matteo and Shira face off against Saban's men in a tense 2 versus 2 fight. Meanwhile, Sabin keeps running with Angie. After realizing that Sabin has escaped with Angie, Matteo decides to go after Sabin alone. When he catches up, Sabin warns him not to come closer, threatening to shoot Angie. At first, Matteo decides to comply with his demands. Then, in a swift move, Matteo throws a blade into Saban's heart. As the blade hits him, Sabin fires a shot as he falls, hitting Matteo, but Matteo survives. After Matteo falls, Angie rushes to check on him. The scene shifts to 6 months later, and we see Angie and Helen wondering if Matteo will ever return, while Matteo is alone again, sailing on a boat. Meanwhile, in the hospital, Shira's partner receives his Medal of Honor. Shira arrives at the hospital and informs him that they have more work to do, bringing the story to a close. This is where the movie ends. If you liked it, don't forget to hit like and subscribe to our channel.
Remember to subscribe and turn on notifications, so you can watch more movies like this. Thanks for watching.